St. Mungo's aside, we see the students enjoy Christmas at Grimmauld Place with Sirius, something that makes Sirius, who's been alone for so long, extremely happy, to the point that he's singing Christmas carols. By the way, I just have to know the lyrics to God Rest Ye Merry Hippogriffs. As usual, we're told about all the gifts Harry receives, a diary from Hermione that seems to talk to you if you don't write in it. Thanks, Hermione? A book about defensive spells from Sirius and Lupin, a furry brown wallet with fangs from Hagrid. The fangs are supposed to keep thieves out, but they ultimately make it impossible to put any money in. A small working firebolt model from Tonks, a huge box of every flavor beans from Ron, the usual sweater and mince pies from Mrs. Weasley, and a horrible painting from Dobby that is apparently supposed to be Harry. They also notice that Creature has gone missing. Harry does speculate the correct reason, that he interpreted Sirius's order literally and left the house, but has no ideas on where he might have gone. He later turns up in the attic, and Harry notices with some unease that he seems to be in a better mood now. Sirius, on the other hand, starts to become grumpy again as the end of the break draws near, knowing this means he'll be left alone again. Even Harry isn't looking forward to returning to Hogwarts for a number of reasons. No Quidditch, probably a ton more homework, Dumbledore continually ignoring him, and of course, the bitch in pink. The only thing that seems to make him want to go back at all are the DA meetings. And then, something else is added to his pile of worries about returning to Hogwarts. Snape arrives at Grimmauld Place and informs Harry that Dumbledore wants him to give Harry occlumency lessons every Monday evening. Occlumency being the art of magically defending one's mind against being read or manipulated. Harry naturally is horrified by the idea of doing extra lessons with Snape, and Sirius, who insisted on sitting in on the discussion, asks why Dumbledore can't teach Harry himself. Snape doesn't seem to know either, and makes it pretty clear that he didn't want to have to be the one to do it. In fact, this was honestly a big mistake on Dumbledore's part, having Snape be the one to teach Harry occlumency. He should have known that Snape's emotions were out of control where Harry and his family are concerned. He should have pushed past his fears of being near Harry and taught him himself. Sirius and Snape get into a huge fight after Sirius warns Snape not to give Harry a hard time during the occlumency lessons. We do overhear a bit of this fight earlier in the movie. The argument gets to the point where the two of them have their wands drawn at each other, and Harry is trying to force them apart. Thankfully, they're interrupted by the arrival of Arthur Weasley, who is now fully recovered. It's around this part of the movie that we then get that scene between Harry and Sirius, where Harry learns about Sirius's family, and Sirius comforts Harry when he thinks he's going bad. I love this scene. As I've mentioned, Sirius's character was greatly improved in the movie, in my opinion, and scenes like this, and the one where he shows Harry that photo, are some of my favorites. I love the speech he gives Harry. It's pretty much entirely original. Gary Oldman is obviously great in this scene, when is he ever not, but I have to say, I think Daniel Radcliffe does pretty well here too.
This connection between me and Voldemort, what if the reason for it is that I am becoming more like him? I just feel so angry all the time. And what if after everything that I've been through, something's gone wrong inside me? What if I'm becoming bad?
Knowing how close the two actors became on set and how much Oldman helped Radcliffe and gave him advice just makes this scene even more emotional. It's also kind of heartbreaking knowing that this is the last we're going to see of Sirius before the battle where he dies.
When all this is over, we'll be a proper family. We'll see.
Unfortunately, the movie did cut something very important here. As the students are preparing to return to Hogwarts, Sirius gives Harry a package telling him it's a way of communicating with him if he needs him. Harry, however, inwardly decides he will never use it. He's worried that after Snape's insult, Sirius might do something reckless, and he doesn't want to be the one to lure him out of his place of safety. As we learn at the end of the book, this package contains a two-way mirror. Basically, it's one of a pair of magical mirrors, of which Sirius has the other one, so the two of them could use them to communicate with each other. The reason it was a mistake for the movie to cut this is because this mirror ends up playing a very important part in Deathly Hallows, and in the movie it just comes out of nowhere. It was never established, never addressed. Harry just randomly has this shard of mirror through which someone who looks like Dumbledore manages to help him. They really should have shown Sirius give Harry the mirror. It's not like it would have added too much length to the movie. So Lupin and Tonks escort them back to Hogwarts. They actually take the night bus, and we get to see Stan Shunpike again. From the sounds of it, he believes the Daily Prophet's lies about Harry, but doesn't seem to care and is just excited to have someone this famous on his bus. Back at Hogwarts, Harry goes through the day dreading the Occlumency lesson with Snape that evening, and using the excuse Snape gave him, which is that he's taking remedial potions, something that greatly amuses Zacharias Smith. One good thing does happen, though. He gets a date with Cho at Hogsmeade on Valentine's Day. At the lesson, Snape explains some things to Harry, like the concept of legilimency, which is the ability to essentially read someone's mind, though Snape hates the phrase as it implies the mind is something that can simply be examined at leisure. Voldemort is extremely skilled at legilimency, so only those who are extremely skilled at occlumency, like Snape for instance, are able to fool him. In general, eye contact is needed to properly use legilimency on someone, but Harry seems to be an exception. As Snape explains, the curse that failed to kill Harry as a child created a connection between him and Voldemort, which, as we'll learn at the end of Deathly Hallows, is because part of Voldemort's soul is inside Harry. And so, at times, when Harry's mind is relaxed and vulnerable, like when he's asleep, he shares Voldemort's thoughts and emotions. Furthermore, during this last vision, where Harry was seeing through the eyes of the snake, Voldemort realized Harry was there, and now that he knows about the connection, he might try and use his own thoughts and feelings to manipulate Harry, hence why he needs to learn occlumency. The lessons themselves then begin, with Snape trying to break into Harry's mind, and Harry trying to resist him. Harry proves to not be very good at controlling his emotions, and is never really able to keep Snape out of his memories without subconsciously using his wand. Of course, Snape's attitude and methods don't exactly help matters. Snape, as usual, is excessively harsh with Harry, and thanks to his attitude, Harry, I think, gets a bit rebellious and doesn't take the lessons as seriously as he should. Plus, I think part of him wants to keep sharing Voldemort's thoughts, as he thinks it could be useful, so he's not really trying all that hard. Again, Dumbledore should have taught Harry himself. He would have been much more patient and understanding, and Harry might have actually been able to learn something from him. I will say this, though. Unlike in potions classes, where it feels like Snape really is just being a dick for no reason, in these lessons I do at least get the impression that Snape wants Harry to succeed, as he properly explains the importance of this, will occasionally offer something somewhat resembling a compliment, and when he gets angry at Harry, it really seems to be because he doesn't think Harry is trying hard enough. Which, to be fair, he's not, but that's also partially Snape's fault. Snape does seem to be taking this seriously, more seriously than any other time he's taught Harry anyway.
Fools who wear their hearts proudly on their sleeves, who cannot control their emotions, who wallow in sad memories and allow themselves to be provoked so easily. Weak people, in other words. They stand no chance against his powers.
I'm not weak!
Then prove it. Control your emotions. Discipline your mind.
Unfortunately, he can't get over his petty feelings about Harry's parents enough to be an effective teacher. Ron even starts to wonder if he's doing it on purpose to make it easier for Voldemort to get into Harry's mind. This isn't the case, of course. An interesting note is that the first time Snape gets legitimately angry with Harry for not trying hard enough, one of the last memories he saw was when Harry saw his parents in the Mirror of Erised, which means Snape also saw Lily in that memory. I think some of his anger here was directed at himself due to the guilt he was feeling over his role in her death. It's also worth noting that at the start of each lesson, Snape removes several thoughts from his head and puts them in the pensieve. Then at the end of the lessons, he puts them back in his head. What he's doing here is removing any thoughts he doesn't want Harry to see, in case Harry happens to access his own mind accidentally. Harry will end up looking at one of these later, but we'll get to that. In this first lesson, when Snape is going through his memories, Harry sees the corridor in the Department of Mysteries that Mr. Weasley led him down on the way to his hearing, and he recognizes it as the corridor he's been seeing in his dreams. It's at this point that he realizes the weapon Voldemort has been after is in the Department of Mysteries, and he informs Ron and Hermione after the lesson is finished. As Harry goes to bed, he feels his scar burning, and he knows that Voldemort is extremely happy about something. And we find out what that something is the next morning. According to the Daily Prophet, 10 Death Eaters have escaped from Azkaban, including Ministry spy Augustus Rookwood, Antonin Dolohov, who murdered Gideon and Fabian Pruitt, who, though it's never explicitly stated, were Mrs. Weasley's brothers, and of course, Bellatrix Lestrange. Fudge blames the escape on Sirius. Can't start admitting he was wrong now, right? I do like how the movie actually shows the breakout in real time and gives us our first glance of Helena Bonham Carter as Bellatrix. I'll talk about her later. The trio also see another article about the death of ministry worker Broderick Bode, who was strangled by a plant in St. Mungo's. I've already brought this up earlier. The trio do suspect that it was murder, but they don't think much more about it at the moment. We see that everyone is talking about the escaped Death Eaters, and several of them don't seem to be finding Fudge's explanation believable. It seems more people are starting to believe Harry a bit more. On top of that, the DA students are taking the lessons even more seriously after the news, especially Neville, seeing as 3 of the escapees were his parents' attackers. He manages to master the shield charm faster than anyone besides Hermione. The movie does include this scene with Neville where he tells Harry about his parents and how Bellatrix Lestrange tortured them.
She tortured them for information, but they never gave in. I'm quite proud to be their son.
We're going to make them proud, Neville. That's a promise.
I do like this scene, but he makes it sound like Bellatrix acted alone, when we know from the last movie that there was at least one other Death Eater responsible. The book also has a nice little moment where Susan Bones, a character who gets very little, if any, focus, tells Harry she knows how he feels now, since she's also been getting a lot of unwanted attention due to many of her relatives having been killed by one of the escaped Death Eaters. Umbridge, however, only seems to become more tyrannical than ever after hearing the news. She passes a new decree forbidding teachers to give students any information not strictly related to the subjects they teach. Lee Jordan jokingly points out that this means she can't tell them off for playing games in class anymore, and this gets him a detention. Furthermore, Hagrid has now been put on probation, and all of his, as well as Trelawney's classes, are being inspected by the Toad. So Valentine's Day arrives, and Harry prepares for his date in Hogsmeade with Cho. However, Hermione, who came up with an idea that she, as usual, didn't tell Harry and Ron when she saw the news of the escaped Death Eaters, asks Harry to meet her and the 3 broomsticks around midday. Harry agrees, and then he meets up with Cho. At first, their date seems to be going alright as they talk enthusiastically about Quidditch, but it starts to go downhill after that as it becomes clear that that's the only real interest they share and the only thing they can comfortably talk about, aside from how awful Umbridge is. Cho does point out how weird it is that there are no Dementors around looking for the 10 escaped Death Eaters like there were when Sirius Black escaped. This leads Harry to suspect that the Dementors must no longer be under the control of the Ministry after all. The 2 of them go into Madame Puttyfoot's tea shop, a place that is disturbingly similar to Umbridge's office, and this is where it all falls apart. Harry has no idea what to do or talk about, and eventually asks her if she wants to come meet Hermione and the 3 broomsticks with him. Ugh, big mistake, Harry. Hearing that he's going to be meeting with another girl turns Cho somewhat cold towards him, and she mentions that Roger Davies, the Ravenclaw Quidditch captain, asked her out once, clearly trying to make Harry jealous. It doesn't make him jealous, though. He's just confused why she's bringing this up. Then she brings up Cedric, which is the last thing Harry wants to talk with her about, but it's something she claims she needs to talk about with him, and she's upset that he doesn't feel the same way. He mentions that he has talked about it with Ron and Hermione, and this just makes her more upset to learn that he'll talk about Cedric with Hermione, but not with her. She storms out, and Harry leaves shortly afterwards, confused and angry, wondering why she always wants to bring up Cedric if it makes her cry so much. Now, because Harry's perspective is the one we're following, I think it's very easy for people to put all of the blame on Cho here. Personally, I think there's blame on both sides. Yes, Cho's jealousy about Hermione is uncalled for, and she was being manipulative in trying to make Harry jealous. But at the same time, I think Harry is being kind of insensitive to her feelings. She needs to talk to him about Cedric because he's the only one who could understand how she feels and help her work through her grief. Harry can't understand this though because his method of dealing with grief is to bottle it up. So from his point of view, Cho is just being irrational and over-emotional. Frankly, her method is probably far healthier than his. They also probably should have seen the red flag that their relationship wasn't going to work when they had nothing to talk to each other about beyond Quidditch. So, following that disastrous date, Harry goes to the Three Broomsticks, where after a brief encounter with a very drunk and depressed Hagrid, who has even more bruises now and is clearly hiding something, Harry meets up with Hermione, who is sitting with Luna Lovegood and Rita Skeeter? It turns out Hermione wants Rita to interview Harry about what really happened the night Voldemort returned and publish it, so that people will have an alternative story to what the Ministry is pushing. Rita points out that Fudge will never allow the Daily Prophet to print an article like that, to which Hermione says that she can publish it in the Quibbler, Luna's dad's magazine, instead. This makes Rita laugh, considering the articles in the Quibbler are all complete nonsense, so no one would believe this article if it was published there. Hermione points out that there were several noticeable holes in the Daily Prophet's article about the escaped Death Eaters, so people wanting to fill those holes will likely look for any alternative explanation, no matter where it comes from. Ultimately, Rita agrees, or rather Hermione blackmails her by threatening to tell the authorities about her animagus form. Harry gives the interview, and Luna sends it off to her father. By the way, there's one little exchange here that I think pretty much sums up journalism. So the Daily Prophet exists to tell people what they want to hear, does it? The Prophet exists to sell itself, you silly girl. Later, at dinner on Monday night, Hermione asks Harry how his date with Cho went, and when he tells her what happened, she tells him that it was a mistake to tell her that he wanted to see Hermione. Like, seriously, even I know that. She says he should have made it sound like she had forced Harry into agreeing to come. She says that girls don't like to ask boys how much they like them, to which Harry angrily responds that they should, and yeah, can't argue with him there. Ron and Ginny then arrive from Quidditch practice, which apparently went horribly. Later in the common room, Fred and George, who saw the practice, are equally gloomy about their prospects in the upcoming match against Hufflepuff. Apparently the new beaters suck, and Ron lets the crowd get to him too easily. Apparently Ginny's pretty good, though. According to Hermione, this is because she's been secretly breaking into their broom shed and trying out their brooms since she was 6. Sadly, the match against Hufflepuff goes just as badly as they expect, as Ron and the two beaters all perform terribly. Thankfully, Ginny does really well and manages to catch the snitch, resulting in Gryffindor only losing by 10 points. The next Monday morning, the Quibbler edition with Harry's interview is published. He receives several letters from people, some of whom say they've been swayed to his side, and others who still think he's crazy. Umbridge, noticing the amount of letters Harry's received, comes over and finds the Quibbler article. Enraged, she takes 50 points from Gryffindor, gives Harry another week's worth of detentions, and bans him from all future Hogsmeade visits. She also passes another educational decree stating that any student found in possession of the Quibbler will be expelled. As Hermione expected, though, banning the magazine only piques the students' curiosity and actually encourages them to read it. Several more students start to believe Harry upon reading it, including Seamus. In the movie, since this whole Quibbler interview was cut, Seamus believes Harry after the Daily Prophet article about the escaped Death Eaters is published, as he doesn't think it makes sense. I'm fine with this, but one issue I do have is that in the movie, he only seems to start believing Harry because his mum does.
Now even me mum says the Prophet's version of things aren't that up.
Which makes it seem like he just goes along with whatever his mum says. In the book, he decides on his own to believe Harry and even sends the article to his mom in hopes of convincing her too. The article also gets Harry back on good terms with Cho, who thinks it was really brave of him. We even see several gestures from teachers expressing their appreciation, like Sprout giving Gryffindor points for incredibly minor things, Flitwick secretly giving Harry a box of sweets, and my favorite, Trelawney going back on all of her predictions about Harry's death, and instead saying he'll live to a ripe old age, become Minister of Magic, and have 12 children. That night, after Harry falls asleep, he once again sees through Voldemort's eyes, as Voldemort is speaking with Augustus Rookwood, one of the Death Eaters who escaped from Azkaban. This is where we learn that Broderick Bode had been placed under the Imperius Curse by Lucius Malfoy to make him steal something from the Department of Mysteries, as Avery, one of the Death Eaters from the graveyard, had told Voldemort he would be able to do so. Rookwood, who worked as a spy in the Department of Mysteries before his capture, knows better though, and he tells Voldemort that Bode would not have been able to do it. Voldemort, realizing his schemes to steal the prophecy over the last few months have been pointless, asks Rookwood to help him. We don't know the full details of what this all means yet, but essentially this is where Voldemort realizes that he will have to use Harry to get the prophecy for him, as Rookwood has informed him that only those to whom a prophecy refers can take it from its shelf. Shortly after this, Harry feels his scar burn again and knows that Voldemort is currently torturing Avery for giving him bad info. Man, that guy just can't catch a break, can he? He was tortured back in the graveyard, too. Harry tells Ron and Hermione what he saw, and they deduce that Bode was sent the murderous plant in order to silence him. They also deduce that Sturgis Podmore was imperious to steal the weapon as well, and that's what he was doing when he was arrested for trying to break through the door to the department. As Hermione points out, however, Harry shouldn't be seeing visions like this at all, as he's supposed to be learning to close his mind to Voldemort. And sure enough, in the next Occlumency lesson, Snape sees that dream in Harry's head and realizes how little progress Harry has truly made.
Perhaps you actually enjoy having these visions and dreams, Potter. Maybe they make you feel special, important.
I don't think Snape is entirely wrong here. I think there is a part of Harry that, due to Dumbledore ignoring him all year, wants to prove himself by providing useful information. Immediately following this, we get a hint that Snape has been spying on Voldemort, as Harry seems to have guessed this.
It is not up to you to find out what the Dark Lord is saying to his Death Eaters.
No, that's your job, isn't it?
Yes, Potter. That is my job.
The next time Snape tries to break into Harry's mind, Harry, like in the movie, uses a shield charm to defend himself, though it's more subconscious in the book, and unintentionally sees into Snape's childhood. This is not where we see the memory of his father bullying Snape, though. That's later. We just see glimpses of things like Snape crying in a corner as his father abuses his mother, and him sitting alone in his bedroom zapping flies off the ceiling. We quickly get the impression that he didn't have the best childhood. Snape forces Harry out of his memories and then goes into Harry's again. After seeing Harry's memories of walking down the Department of Mysteries corridor, curiously going farther down it than Harry ever did in his dreams, Snape again gets angry at Harry for not trying hard enough to block that out. Like I said, he's going about it badly, but he does seem to want Harry to do well here. However, the lesson is suddenly interrupted by a scream outside. It turns out the scream was from Professor Trelawney. She's just been fired. As I mentioned before, this scene, though taking place at very different points, plays out pretty much the same in both versions, though in the book, Umbridge's sadistic enjoyment of Trelawney's misery is even more apparent. One thing the movie doesn't include, though, is that after Dumbledore denies Umbridge's desire to have Trelawney sent away, he also appoints a new divination teacher, Firenze, the centaur who saved Harry from Voldemort way back in Philosopher's Stone. After a gap of 4 books, he returns now as a teacher. Of course, Umbridge is pissed. Not only did Dumbledore hire a new teacher without consulting her, but he hired a filthy half-breed. Firenze's divination classes turn out to be interesting. First of all, his classroom, thanks to some magic from Dumbledore, resembles a forest. He dismisses Trelawney's teachings and fortune-telling in general as petty human nonsense, and teaches them several centaur methods of divining the future, like reading star patterns and burning herbs to find shapes in the flames. However, when none of them are able to do it properly, he doesn't seem concerned at all, as according to him, even centaurs take years to learn how to do this properly. He was nothing like any human teacher Harry had ever had. His priority did not seem to be to teach them what he knew, but rather to impress upon them that nothing, not even the centaur's knowledge, was foolproof. You know, I kind of feel like Luna would be good at divination. Firenze also reveals that he was banished by the other centaurs for agreeing to work for Dumbledore. They see this as a disgrace to their kind, as he is acting subservient to a human, who most of them consider themselves to be above, and sharing their secrets with human children. We did see, even way back in the first book, that Firenze was quite different from the other centaurs in this regard. I'm not gonna lie, it would have been cool to see him in the movies again, but unfortunately a lot did have to be cut for this movie to get it to a proper length, and he was one of those necessary victims. After the class, Firenze asks Harry to tell Hagrid that his attempt is not working and he would do better to abandon it. Harry delivers this message, but Hagrid brushes it off, even faced with the prospect of losing his job, saying that some things are more important than keeping a job. As we later learn, he's talking about his attempt to tame his half-brother, Grawp. So, catching back up with the movie, we then come to what will be the last DA session, where Harry is teaching them how to conjure Patronuses. A few of them are able to do it, like we see Hermione conjure an otter-shaped one in both versions. In the book, Cho conjures a swan-shaped one, and in the movie, Ginny conjures a horse, Luna conjures a rabbit, and even Ron is able to conjure one in the shape of a dog. I do like how Ginny was the first one we see conjure a fully formed Patronus in the movie. If they weren't going to do her character justice, at least they showed how powerful she is. And Seamus has been added to the DA now that he believes Harry. In the book, he comes close to conjuring a Patronus, but can't quite do it. Sadly, as I mentioned, this will be the last DA lesson as Umbridge arrives to break it up. In the movie, she simply uses to break through the wall into the room. I have a problem with this because the Room of Requirement doesn't work like that. You can't just break into it. That kind of defeats the purpose. Also, in the movie, it was shown that her cronies knew where the students were practicing, so why didn't she do this sooner? The other difference here is that it was Cho who sold out the group, whereas in the book, it was her friend Marietta. I guess I get why the movie wanted to simplify this, but I kind of wish they hadn't. I feel so bad for her when everyone, including Harry, started ignoring her. Of course, we learn later that she didn't do this of her own free will, she was under the influence of Veritaserum, but we still never get to see her make up with the other students afterwards. Thankfully, she shows back up in Deathly Hallows, so it seems like they did make up with her off-screen. I also think it's a bit of a disservice to Snape's character if he provided Umbridge with real Veritaserum. In the book, it's explicitly stated at the end that the Veritaserum he gave her was fake. So, what happened here in the book? Well, Dobby runs into the Room of Requirement and warns them that Umbridge knows about the DA and is coming. They all run, and Harry ends up being tripped by Draco Malfoy, who alerts Umbridge that he caught Harry. Umbridge then arrives and brings Harry up to Dumbledore's office, where Dumbledore, McGonagall, Fudge, Percy, Kingsley, and another Auror named Dawlish are waiting. The scene in Dumbledore's office was done well in the movie, though very much simplified from the book version. It gets across the important points. Dumbledore covers for Harry and claims himself to be responsible for forming Dumbledore's army to get Harry off the hook. Fudge then orders Dumbledore arrested for conspiring against the Ministry, but Dumbledore escapes with the help of Fawkes. I will say, Fudge is much more vindictive in the book than in the movie, where he seems almost a little regretful about what he's doing.
You will escort Dumbledore to Azkaban to await trial for conspiracy and sedition.
In the book, he's rubbing this in Dumbledore's face at every opportunity, and Percy acts like a cackling sycophant every time he does so. There are some interesting details the movie leaves out, so I'll just go over how the book version of the scene plays out. First of all, as I mentioned before, it was not Cho who sold them out in the book, it was her friend Marietta, and unlike Cho in the movie, she was not under the influence of Veritaserum. She never trusted Harry from the start and informed Umbridge of her own free will. As a result, Hermione's jinx kicked in and pimples grew all over her face in the shape of the word sneak. Umbridge brings her in so she can tell Fudge everything, but she's covering her face and doesn't want to say anything more for fear of it getting worse. According to Umbridge, Marietta had just gotten far enough to tell her the location of the meeting before the jinx kicked in and she refused to say any more. As such, she didn't get any details about what the meeting was about or who was there. Umbridge then reveals that she had made a deal with Willie Wittershins to let him off the hook for his crimes in exchange for his services as a spy, and he overheard the students meeting in the Hog's Head about forming a secret Defense Against the Dark Arts group. Both McGonagall and one of the previous headmaster portraits makes their feelings about this very clear.
Oh, so that's why he wasn't prosecuted for setting up all those regurgitating toilets. What an interesting insight into our justice system.
Blatant corruption! The Ministry did not cut deals with petty criminals in my day. No, sir, they did not. Dumbledore points out, however, that the Ministry decree banning student societies wasn't put into effect until after said meeting, so it was not technically illegal at the time. Umbridge fires back that even if it wasn't, all the meetings that happened afterwards were, to which Dumbledore asks her for proof that 6 months worth of meetings did indeed occur, seeing as Marietta was only reporting a single meeting tonight. At this moment, Kingsley, very quietly so as to keep his cover, uses a memory charm on Marietta. So when Umbridge questions her about the meetings that happened, she simply shakes her head, seeing as she no longer remembers them. This, of course, pisses Umbridge off to the point that she actually grabs Marietta and starts shaking her. At this, Dumbledore and Kingsley both pull out their wands, with Dumbledore telling her off for manhandling his students, and Kingsley, again keeping his cover, warning her she could get into trouble for this. Fudge brings the conversation back by pointing out that they know for a fact there was a meeting tonight. Umbridge then tells the rest of the story about how she arrived at the Room of Requirement only to find the students fleeing, having already been warned, and Pansy Parkinson grabbed the list of members from the room and gave it to her. She shows the list to Fudge, who was shocked to see the title Dumbledore's Army. This is pretty much where the movie picks up, as Dumbledore uses this to take the fall for Harry.
Most noble of you, Harry, to shield me. But as has been pointed out, the parchment clearly says Dumbledore's Army, not Potter's. I instructed Harry to form this organization, and I alone am responsible for its activities.
A delighted Fudge orders Percy to send a copy of the notes he's been taking to the Daily Prophet, which Percy instantly rushes off to do, and then Fudge pronounces Dumbledore under arrest, which leads to this line I absolutely love.
You seem to be laboring under the delusion that I'm going to... What was the phrase? Come quietly.
The book then has another great Dumbledore line.
So, you intend to take on Dawlish, Shacklebolt, Dolores, and myself single-handed, do you? Merlin's beard, no. Not unless you were foolish enough to force me to.
Which is true, because let's be honest, Kingsley won't really try, and I don't think Fudge and the Toad are that great at magic. As for Dawlish, according to Dumbledore, he scored an outstanding, the top grade, on all of his nudes, which are the 7th year exams, but even so, I doubt he's a match for Dumbledore, especially considering the things we hear about him in later books. In the movie, Dumbledore uses Fawkes to escape instantly, knocking the others to the ground. In the book, however, he uses a spell to knock out Fudge, Umbridge, Dawlish, and Kingsley so he could talk to Harry and McGonagall. He had to knock out Kingsley to keep up appearances, of course. He tells Harry to practice occlumency as hard as he can and to do everything Snape tells him to do. As he grabs Harry's arm, Harry has that feeling again of wanting to attack Dumbledore thanks to the connection between him and Voldemort. Dumbledore then leaves using Fawkes, and Fudge, Umbridge, Kingsley, and Dawlish wake up. Dawlish, Kingsley, and Umbridge race out of the office to try to pursue Dumbledore, while Fudge tells McGonagall to take Harry and Marietta back to their dormitories. The portraits of the previous headmasters make their feelings towards Fudge quite clear. The portrait of Phineas Nigellus even says,
You know, Minister, I disagree with Dumbledore on many counts, but you can't deny he's got style.
This line was spoken in the movie, but it was given to Kingsley. While I do like seeing Phineas, someone who generally doesn't respect Dumbledore much, compliment him in this way, George Harris's delivery alone makes me glad they gave this line to Kingsley in the movie.
You may not like him, Minister, but you can't deny Dumbledore's got style.
So yeah, I think this scene was done very well, and cutting the whole first half of it was a smart move. But I won't lie, I do love seeing Dumbledore make his arguments against Umbridge's case before being forced to take the fall, as well as Kingsley actively contributing by wiping Marietta's memory. It's also worth mentioning that Percy is in this scene in the movie, which might be a little confusing to movie-only people, since they didn't go into his storyline. I am left wondering why they bothered to show him here. So following Dumbledore's disappearance, Umbridge appoints herself headmistress of Hogwarts. We see some things in the movie the book doesn't show, like a bunch of paintings being taken down. This moment with Filch sliding a painting's inhabitants out of it is kind of funny. And Umbridge punishing the entirety of Dumbledore's army, except Cho, by forcing them to write with blood quills. In the book, they never really get punished. We also see Cho being ignored by everyone, which, while I understand their anger, made me feel really bad for her, knowing she had no choice. Like I said, I don't like the movie's decision to make Cho the one to rat them out, even if I understand why they did it. Also, seeing Harry treat her this way really makes him seem like a dick. I mean, this is exactly how people have been treating him all year. You'd think he, of all people, would be sympathetic enough to at least hear her out. I do like this scene the movie added following it, though, where Ron and Hermione apologize for talking Harry into forming the DA, and Harry laments over the fact that he wasn't able to help anyone in the end.
Harry, if it's anyone's fault, it's ours.
Yeah, we talked you into it. Yeah, but I agreed. I tried so hard to help, and all it's done is make things worse.
I think he's wrong, though. He did help those other students simply by bringing them together and teaching them what it's really like to fight the dark arts. Now, at this point in the movie is where Hagrid takes the trio into the forest to show them Grawp. This doesn't happen until a bit later in the book. In the book, what we see after the notice of Umbridge's appointment as headmistress is that she has formed the Inquisitorial Squad made up of students, most if not all Slytherins, who are loyal to the Ministry. These students have the power to dock points from other students, even prefects, and Malfoy abuses this power right away. He takes 5 points from Hufflepuff because Ernie Macmillan argues with him, and from Gryffindor he takes 5 from Ron because his shirt's untucked, 5 from Harry simply because he doesn't like him, and 15 from Hermione for insulting Umbridge and being a mudblood. After he and his friends leave, Fred and George show up. According to them, Montague from the Slytherin Quidditch team tried to take points from them, but they stuffed him in a vanishing cabinet before he could, and now there's no telling if and when he'll turn up again. This seems like a funny joke right now, but this is actually what gives Malfoy the idea to use this cabinet next year to get the Death Eaters into Hogwarts. Fred and George make it very clear that they don't care anymore if they get expelled and tell the trio they're planning a bit of mayhem for Umbridge and suggest the trio get into the Great Hall so they can't be blamed for it. As they begin to do so, however, Filch arrives and tells Harry that the headmistress wants to see him. Filch takes Harry to Umbridge's office, gloating the whole way there that things are going to be different with her in charge and that soon he'll have the power to whip and string up students. Umbridge's office is still where it always was. Apparently she tried to get into the headmaster's office, but it sealed itself against her and she threw a tantrum. Umbridge gives Harry a drink, which she obviously spiked with Veritaserum, or so she thought, as we later learned Snape provided her with fake Veritaserum. She questions Harry about the whereabouts of both Dumbledore and Sirius, to which Harry, who guessed that the drink was spiked and only pretended to drink it, responds that he doesn't know. Umbridge also mentions something that Harry remembers later. All channels of communication in and out of the school are being watched, except for the fireplace in her office. The interrogation is interrupted by a loud explosion. Turns out Fred and George set off magical fireworks all around the school. In the movie, they do this in the Great Hall while the students are writing their OWL exams, and this is when they leave Hogwarts. It's pretty spectacular. I especially love when this fiery dragon engulfs Umbridge and destroys all of her educational decrees. Also, Flitwick quietly fist-pumping like this is hilarious. In the book, this is only the first step in the twins' plan to give Umbridge hell. Also, the fireworks go off all over the school throughout that afternoon, and the other teachers don't seem to care. They could probably deal with them themselves, but seem to prefer to let Umbridge do it. The upshot of it all was that Professor Umbridge spent her first afternoon as headmistress running all over the school, answering the summonses of the other teachers, none of whom seemed able to rid their rooms of the fireworks without her. When the final bell rang and they were heading back to Gryffindor Tower with their bags, Harry saw with immense satisfaction a disheveled and soot-blackened Umbridge tottering sweaty-faced from Professor Flitwick's classroom. "Thank you so much, Professor. I could have got rid of the sparklers myself, of course, but I wasn't sure whether or not I had the authority." That night, the twins are hailed as heroes in the Gryffindor common room. Even Hermione congratulates them and suggests to Harry and Ron they take the night off homework. That night, Harry dreams about the Department of Mysteries again, but this time it goes much further. He walks through several rooms until he gets to a room with shelves lined with silver glass orbs, the Hall of Prophecies. At that moment, however, he's woken up by 2 of the fireworks colliding with each other. It's worth noting that at this point, though we don't know it yet, Voldemort is deliberately letting Harry see this in hopes of piquing his curiosity and luring him there to take the prophecy for him. On his way to his Occlumency lesson the next day, Harry is approached by Cho, who apologizes for Marietta, and much to his anger, starts making excuses for her, saying that her mom works at the Ministry, so she didn't really have a choice. Harry doesn't want to hear it and points out that Ron's dad also works at the Ministry. Cho then gets angry at Hermione for the jinx she used, causing Harry to defend Hermione, and Cho's jealousy to flare up again. Harry's kind of over her crying at this point and says he has enough to deal with, causing her to storm off. And that's pretty much the end of their relationship. In this particular argument, I am more on Harry's side. It's really nice of Cho to stick by her friend, but considering how she sold them all out, I don't know. Maybe give her the cold shoulder for a bit at least. Cho also should have known better than to bring her to the meetings when she clearly didn't trust Harry. Harry is again being insensitive to her feelings, but I don't know if I'm in much of a position to blame him considering I might have said the exact same things in his place. Whatever that says about me. Regardless, I think the book handles their breakup much better than the movie. In the movie, Harry is just kind of pissed at her for selling them out, and that's pretty much it. Even after he learned she had been fed Veritaserum, we never see them make up or anything. It's just suddenly over. In the book, they actually break up because of their different personalities, priorities, and values, and the fact that ultimately there was no special bond between them. Not because of some stupid misunderstanding. So because of this, Harry arrives late to his occlumency lesson, which is promptly interrupted by Draco Malfoy, who informs Snape that Montague has been found jammed in a toilet on the 4th floor. Snape rushes to help, telling Harry they'll resume their lesson tomorrow. Left alone in Snape's office, Harry makes to leave, but then he spots the pensieve containing the thoughts Snape has removed from his head, and his curiosity gets the better of him as he wonders what kind of memories Snape is so keen to hide from him. He enters the pensieve, and this is where we see the memory of Snape being bullied by Harry's father. Now, this is one of those changes that I think was truly a mistake, and not simply me being disappointed. This memory is very important, and they don't show nearly enough of it. In the movie, we do see that Harry's dad bullied Snape, but that's about it. There is so much left out, and at least judging from some screenshots, it seems like some of these things were originally filmed. Considering this is already shorter than all the other films, I think showing more of this memory wouldn't have hurt at all. Harry arrives in the memory in the Great Hall as the students are taking their defense against the Dark Arts Owl exam. Snape, as we see, has written about a foot more than the students next to him, despite his writing being tiny. Harry also spots, to his great excitement, his father, along with Sirius, Lupin, and Pettigrew. As the students leave the hall, the 4 Marauders talk about how easy the exam was, except Pettigrew, who doesn't seem to have done too well. Harry follows them as best he can, while still keeping Snape in sight. This is Snape's memory, after all. Ultimately, he's the one Harry has to stick close to. The Marauders relax under a tree near the lake as James starts playing with a snitch he apparently stole. Sirius expresses his boredom, and this is when James points out Snape. James and Sirius both approach him, calling him Snivelous. James disarms him when he goes for his wand, and then they both make fun of his appearance as they hit him with spells. Wormtail laughs and claps, while Lupin just watches them frowning. We get a good idea here of what kind of people each of the Marauders were. James and Sirius were the real bullies, and very full of themselves. Pettigrew wasn't really a bully, but just wanted to be with the cool kids. And Lupin was greatly against their bullying, but too afraid of losing his only friends to do anything about it. Someone who does do something about it, however, is Lily. She yells at James to leave Snape alone, and when she asks what Snape did to him to deserve this, his response is, well, it's more the fact that he exists, if you know what I mean. He then promises to leave Snape alone on the condition that Lily go out with him. Lily angrily shoots him down, of course. Snape manages to use a spell, revealed in Half-Blood Prince to be Sectum Sempra, which cuts open James's face, and then James uses Levicorpus on Snape, hanging him upside down in the air, revealing his underwear. Lily demands James let him down, which he does, only for Sirius to put a full body bind on him. After yet another angry demand from Lily, James releases Snape from the body bind and tells him he's lucky Lily was there to look out for him, causing Snape to say something he would regret for the rest of his life. I don't need help from filthy little mudbloods like her. Right now, we don't know the full relationship between Lily and Snape, but we will learn about it in Deathly Hallows, of course. Snape blurted this out in a moment of anger and humiliation, and regretted it immediately afterwards. This was what caused the end of their friendship, as Lily, rightfully, wanted nothing more to do with him after he said that. James demands that Snape apologize, but Lily rounds on him, saying he's just as bad, and gives him what TV Tropes calls a "the reason you suck" speech. She storms off, and a furious James turns back to Snape and levitates him into the air again, planning to take off his pants. It's at this moment, however, that the present-day Snape finds Harry and pulls him out of the memory. Snape orders Harry to leave and refuses to teach him occlumency anymore. As usual, he's a lot angrier in the book, even throwing a jar of dead cockroaches at Harry as he rushes out. Again, it was a mistake on Dumbledore's part to have Snape teach Harry something so important. He's way too emotionally irrational for this. So, as you can see, the memory in the book is a lot more detailed, as we see in more detail what the Marauders, Lily, and Snape were all like as teenagers, as well as James and Lily's dynamic before they became a couple, and of course Snape's relationship with the whole group, especially Lily, which will become very important later. I just love learning all of this about the adult characters' childhoods, especially Harry's parents, who we never really got to know before, and I really think the filmmakers made a mistake by not showing more of it. Aside from the memory itself, though, what also gets lost in adaptation is Harry's feelings about what he saw, which I think are almost equally as important. Harry has always had this rather saintly image of his father, and he has now been confronted with the truth about him, seeing his father's worst traits firsthand. He never really has to deal with this in the movie, but in the book, this is something he dwells on for pretty much the entirety of the next chapter. He tries to justify his father's actions in his head, but considering the fact that James started the fight and straight up said it's more the fact that he exists, Harry can't justify it. He even starts to wonder whether he might have forced Lily into marrying him. Needless to say, he doesn't think very highly of his father right now. Of course, everyone thinks Harry is upset either because of the upcoming exams or his breakup with Cho. Harry has a nice moment with Ginny, who suggests he try to talk to Cho, but Harry responds that it's really Sirius he wants to talk to. Ginny says that there might be a way he can talk to Sirius, and this actually gets Harry more hopeful. The two of them clearly have much more of a connection than Harry and Cho had. A connection that isn't seen in the movie, unfortunately. Fred and George approach the trio later after Ginny has informed them that Harry wants to talk to Sirius, and they agree to cause a diversion so that Harry can sneak into Umbridge's office, using the knife Sirius gave Harry last Christmas, and use her fire, which she said was unmonitored, to talk to Sirius. Harry goes through the whole Monday with Hermione constantly trying to dissuade him from his plan of talking to Sirius, but he ignores her. Just like Snape has started ignoring Harry. In potions classes, Snape acts as if Harry isn't even there, and Harry finds that without his constant insults, he's able to make the potions quite easily. Not that that stops Snape from being a dick and deliberately breaking it when Harry's not looking just so he can give him a bad mark. Following potions, Harry goes to McGonagall's office as all the students are required to talk to their head of house about their career prospects and possibilities. And of course, Umbridge just has to sit in on this. Harry tells McGonagall that he'd like to become an Auror, and she informs him that he'll need to pass at least 5 of his Newt exams in his 7th year in order to become one. She recommends that he continue Defense Against the Dark Arts, Transfiguration, Charms, and Potions, though she says that Snape refuses to take anyone who gets anything less than an Outstanding, the highest grade, on their owl. Throughout this, Umbridge keeps trying to interrupt, saying that Harry will never be able to become an Auror, but McGonagall keeps ignoring her. Eventually, however, she delivers this burn.
He has achieved high marks in all of his Defense Against the Dark Arts tests. I'm terribly sorry to have to contradict you, Minerva, but as you will see from my note, Harry has been achieving very poor results in his classes with me. I should have made my meaning plainer. He has achieved high marks in all Defense Against the Dark Arts tests set by a competent teacher.
The two of them then get into a shouting match as Umbridge brings up Harry's criminal record and insists that he has no hope of becoming an Auror, and McGonagall responds by loudly telling Harry that she'll do anything in her power to help him become one. When Umbridge says that Fudge will never employ Harry, McGonagall shouts that he probably won't be minister much longer. She then dismisses Harry, and the two of them continue to yell at each other as Harry leaves. I honestly love this scene. Not only do we get to see McGonagall destroy Umbridge with her words, but I just love it when she drops her stern, by-the-book demeanor and shows her support for Harry. Following this, Harry hears Fred and George's diversion going off, and he rushes into Umbridge's office, using Sirius's knife to unlock the door, and uses the fireplace to project his head into Grimmauld Place. While there, he talks to Sirius and Lupin about the memory he saw. The two of them assure Harry that his father was a good person. Yeah, he was an arrogant, showboating bully at 15, and Sirius admits he was as well, but he grew out of it. They also assure him that James, despite his bullying ways, always hated the dark arts, and that Lily did truly grow to like him after he had deflated his head a bit and stopped bullying. The two of them also insist that Harry go back to Snape and demand that he continue teaching him occlumency. I would have liked to have seen this moment in the movie, as I feel this is where Harry comes to terms with the fact that his father wasn't perfect, but that doesn't mean he was a bad person and that he can't still look up to him. Harry quickly has to leave as he hears someone coming and puts on the invisibility cloak just in time as Filch enters the office and gleefully pulls out a permission form from the desk. It seems Umbridge has given him permission to whip misbehaving students. Holy shit, she's evil. Harry rushes out of the office and goes to the entrance hall, where it seems Fred and George have been caught by the Inquisitorial Squad. Apparently they turned an entire corridor into a swamp. Filch arrives with the permission form, and Umbridge gives him permission to use the whips on the twins. Fred and George, however, have other plans. They summon their brooms to them and mount them. They tell everyone assembled that they have set up a shop in Diagon Alley and offer discounts to anyone planning to use their product on Umbridge. The two of them then fly out of the school, but not before Fred yells, "Give her hell from us, Peeves," and Peeves actually salutes him. Following their departure, we see that things don't exactly go Umbridge's way, as a good number of students start following in their footsteps by causing as much mayhem as possible. Lee Jordan sneaks a Niffler into Umbridge's office, and nearly all students start using Fred and George's skiving snack boxes to make themselves sick during her classes. They tell her they're all suffering from Umbridgeitis. And of course, Peeves, taking Fred's words to heart, is unmatched in the chaos he causes. The teachers, who also enjoy seeing Umbridge suffer, do nothing to stop this. In fact, there's one particularly hilarious moment right here. Indeed, a week after Fred and George's departure, Harry witnessed Professor McGonagall walking right past Peeves, who was determinedly loosening a crystal chandelier, and could have sworn he heard her tell the poltergeist out of the corner of her mouth, "It unscrews the other way." Ron and Hermione start to wonder where the twins got the money to buy premises in Diagon Alley, and Hermione even wonders if Mundungus talked them into doing something illegal for it. This is where Harry finally admits to them that he gave the twins his Triwizard winnings. Later, Hermione insists that Harry return to Snape and resume his Occlumency Lessons, but Harry lies and says that he hasn't been dreaming about the Department of Mysteries lately, even though he totally has. His internal narration informs us that due to his curiosity about what's hidden there, he actually wants the dreams to continue. Now obviously this is a bad idea, and Harry should know better, but to be fair, it's partly Dumbledore's fault as well. If he hadn't ignored Harry all this year, and if he had taught him occlumency himself, he could have impressed upon him the importance of it and how Voldemort might try to take advantage of it. Harry might have taken it more seriously then. Gryffindor then has a Quidditch match against Ravenclaw, but Harry and Hermione are only able to watch just long enough for one goal to be scored on Ron, because Hagrid approaches them and asks them to come with him while everyone's distracted by the match. This is where Hagrid takes Harry and Hermione into the forest to show them Grawp, so Ron's not with them like he is in the movie. He reveals to them that Grawp is his half-brother, as his mother had taken up with another giant after she left his dad. Sadly, she left Grawp too because he was so small for a giant at only 16 feet. Hagrid, seeing how the other giants were bullying him for his size, decided to bring him back with him, and Hermione realizes that he's been giving Hagrid all these injuries. He tells them that he wants them to look after Grawp and keep him company if Umbridge sacks him. They aren't exactly keen on this idea. Hagrid then wakes Grawp up, in the book he's asleep when they first find him, and introduces Harry and Hermione to him. Since Hermione's name would be hard for him to remember, Hagrid suggests he call her Hermy. Grawp in general is much more friendly and gentle in the movie than in the book. When Hermione angrily tells him to put her down, he does so, and then he gives her this bell to ring.
Just needs a firm hand is all.
In the book, Harry pulls her out of the way when Grawp tries to grab her, and Grawp accidentally knocks Hagrid over. At this, Hagrid quickly decides to take Harry and Hermione and go. Unlike in the movie, where meeting Grawp is portrayed as a very charming and whimsical moment, in the book, Harry and Hermione are both terrified and miserable about the prospect of having to look after him. And after they leave the forest, Hermione goes on a furious rant about Hagrid, even suggesting Umbridge might have a point about firing him, though she immediately takes that back. Before they get out of the forest, however, they encounter a group of centaurs, including Megorian, who appears to be the leader of the herd, and Bane, who we met back in Philosopher's Stone. It turns out the centaurs are angry at Hagrid for helping Firenze escape from them when they attacked him for going to work for Dumbledore. They consider themselves above humans, so to them, Firenze working for one is a huge disgrace to their species. Megorian, despite Bane's protests, agrees to let Hagrid go this time, because he has children with him. Hagrid gets pissed at the centaurs for acting like the forest is theirs alone, but at Harry and Hermione's insistence, he walks away. This encounter obviously doesn't happen in the movie. They do see the centaur herd roar past on their way to Grawp, but they don't interact with them. Hagrid simply mentions something about the Ministry restricting their territory. After they leave the forest, Hagrid goes back to his hut as Harry and Hermione head back towards the Quidditch pitch where the match has just finished, and Hermione rants about Hagrid. As they get near the Quidditch pitch, they hear the Weasley is our king song, but this time the words are different and it's being sung by the Gryffindors. Turns out they won the match and therefore the cup. Apparently Ron greatly improved and saved every shot after that first one. Ron enjoys bragging about his victory for a while, reminding Harry very much of James, until Harry and Hermione tell him about Grawp and they all collectively agree that Hagrid's lost his mind.